Told Lakin's grieving parents that we would ensure their daughter would not have died in vain. That's why the very first bill I signed into law as your 47th president mandates the detention of all dangerous criminal aliens who threaten public safety.
Georgia played an important role last night when President Donald Trump made his very first joint congressional address after his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States. I'm Tim Darnell, along with my friend and colleague Rick Folbaum. This is Political Update for Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. But Rick, before we get into the details of President Trump's congressional address last night, I'm going to start off with some breaking news that we only heard about this morning. Georgia Congresswoman Lucy McBath has filed paperwork to form an exploratory committee to explore a possible governor's campaign, a gubernatorial campaign in 2026. Now, if she's successful, McBath would become the nation's first African-American female governor. This is something that Stacey Abrams has twice tried to accomplish in 2018 and 2022. We all know that Georgia's governor's race is wide open in 2026. Brian Kemp is constitutionally prohibited from seeking a third term. This race in 2026 is wide open, and it's for all the marbles.
It sure is, and it would be, as you said, history-making if she were to win and become the nation's first female black governor. So Stacey Abrams couldn't do it. Can Lucy McBath? That's the question, and the forming of this exploratory committee is really the first step. It allows her to raise money. It allows her to start the process of becoming a formal candidate without actually having to declare her candidacy. That is expected, actually, in the next week or so. So then she will make it formal, but it does seem as though she has her eyes on the governor's mansion. This is a lawmaker who has not been on the scene for very long. She's served in the Congress now for a couple of terms. She's survived redistricting. She had to move to a different district because of the new maps, and she went and won there as well. So she has shown some resilience. Her main platform is really on the topic of gun control and gun safety. She comes from a background where she knows all too well what can happen when, as a result of gun violence, losing her son to gun violence a number of years ago. That, she has told the story many times, is what propelled her to enter politics after a long career in the aviation industry as a flight attendant. And so she has become one of the leading voices on gun control in Washington, D.C. She is well respected. She has a reputation of being able to work across party lines and talk to people, even those who don't agree with her positions. And so it will be interesting. You said it's a wide open race. We have Burt Jones, lieutenant governor, who is almost definitely going to be the Republican nominee, taking over for Governor Kemp, who is term limited out. But on the Democrat side, you're right. It does look as though it's wide open at this point, and Lucy McBath trying to get her foot in the water here early to sort of stake her claim and begin the conversation of what a Lucy McBath governorship and governor agenda might look like. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how she broadens this message. Certainly gun control is a topic that a lot of Georgians care about. It was discussed in the state legislature, which we'll talk about in a moment, especially in light of the school massacre at Appalachia High School 6 months ago. It's something that is top of mind, but certainly there are other topics as well that Georgia voters care about and want to hear her views on. And so it'll be interesting to see how she expands her message beyond gun control and gun violence and starts talking about some of the other issues like, for example, the economy and where she stands on that.
Well, we know that Attorney General Chris Carr so far is the only publicly announced candidate for governor in 2026. You mentioned Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Also, we're hearing speculation that Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger could also be considering a GOP gubernatorial candidacy on the Democratic side. We now know Lucy McBath is interested. We've heard speculation that even Jason Carter, grandson of the former president, now late President Jimmy Carter, might be interested in. Former DeKalb County CEO and Georgia statewide Commissioner Michael Thurman could be possibly considering to be a candidate as well. We mentioned Stacey Abrams. You mentioned her attempts in 2018 and 2022 to become the nation's first African-American female governor. Stacey Abrams seemingly was also on the mind of former now President Donald Trump during his address last night before a joint session of Congress. The president said that Stacey Abrams, he implied that Abrams had benefited from a $2 billion grant to combat climate change. After a little bit of research, we've been able to determine the grant that President Trump was referring to was to a group called Power Forward Communities, which was a coalition of green energy efficiency organizations for which Stacey Abrams had served as a counsel for one of those groups, an organization called Rewiring America. We're all talking about this morning the fallout from President Trump's speech. Here are a couple of highlights.
America is back.
President Donald Trump got a rousing reception from Republicans. From the Democrats, there was dissent. Texas Congressman Al Green was escorted away.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum.
During his speech, the president asked Congress for more funding of border security. He doubled down on cuts to the federal government.
I imposed an immediate freeze on all federal hiring.
Following Friday's clash, President Trump played up a new letter from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table.
The president also announced that one of the suspected planners behind the 2021 bombing attack that killed 13 U.S. service members outside Kabul airport in Afghanistan has been arrested. The economy was the main topic of the night. President Trump defended putting new tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China, and he pledged to put reciprocal tariffs on other countries next month.
Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again.
Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin delivered the Democratic response.
There's a responsible way to make change and a reckless way.
A CBS News poll showed that a heavily Republican audience approved of the president's speech. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Rick, have you ever seen a sitting member of Congress escorted from the chamber by the House Sergeant-at-Arms during a presidential address? Have you ever seen that?
No. And I've been watching these presidential addresses for many, many years, as have you. We have seen things get a little rowdy over the years. I remember back to during the Obama days when there was a Republican member of Congress who shouted out, "You lie," during one of his addresses to a joint session of Congress. That at the time was seen as a real sort of lapse of decorum when it comes to these presidential speeches, which are typically, a little bit more staid, even though there's a lot of clapping involved and partisanship. You don't typically hear members of Congress shouting out from their seats during the speech. But again, you mentioned this congressman from Texas who is a very staunch anti-Trump member of Congress who did not like what he was hearing from President Trump last night and didn't really seem to mind that he made these headlines of being escorted out of the hall because, of course, now we're talking about it. And I think that was probably his overall goal. Democrats as a whole have been trying to come up with a way to voice their opposition to the new Trump administration and some of the new policies that are being put in place. And so perhaps this was a way for them to at least, get themselves put into the news cycle a little bit. We also saw some Democrats who were holding paddles, signs that they held up at various points that said false. So, they were anti-Trump signs that they used. It was sort of a silent way of protesting. But of course, all the headlines are about the congressman who was kicked out of the hall. So, it's a lot of norm busting going on. But you know what? I think we're going to see more of this over the next 4 years, Tim, because we think about the Oval Office meeting that took place last week with President Zelensky of Ukraine. We had never seen a meeting like that before, where there was so much, contention in the room, and we saw the president and the vice president basically, both of them berating Zelensky to his face in front of the cameras. President Trump seemed to love that as well, telling the TV producers to keep rolling. We want the American people to see this, almost as though it was pre-planned, that they were going to go in and do this. So again, that was something that was, it's not typical, not something that we'd ever seen before. And so again, I think this is going to be sort of the new norm in Trump 2.0, as the Trump people and President Trump in particular use their understanding of communications, their strategy of getting people's attention, and watching the Democrats try to figure out a way to respond to that, even if it means getting thrown out of the halls of Congress.
Well, the clip that we played at the beginning of our stream today was President Trump recognizing the mother and the sister of Laken Riley, whose body was found tragically on the campus of the University of Georgia now more than a year ago.
Yeah.
And this was an issue that really galvanized the campaign and supporters of President Trump, then former President Trump at that time, to propel him to a historic second non-consecutive term in the White House. We know the story of Laken Riley, and he mentioned last night that this was the first bill signed into law under his administration. How much more of a political momentum do you think this particular issue has to continue his efforts at immigration reform from the Oval Office?
Well, I think that as long as there are stories in the news that involve illegal immigrants committing crimes, doesn't necessarily have to be murder, as was the case with Laken Riley, but any kind of serious crime gives the president and his supporters an opportunity to continue pushing their agenda and their view, which is that those who have broken the law in coming to the country need to be removed. And the Trump administration has said they want to start with the violent offenders, but it does seem as though they're looking at a crackdown on really anyone who is here in the country illegally. We've heard about these ICE raids and roundups that are taking place here in Georgia and around the country that are going around and collecting people who, might not even have a very serious criminal background or any criminal background at all. And so, but again, as these stories happen, if and when they happen, it just adds fuel to the fire and allows Republicans to continue to point towards the danger that they say the country faces as a result of illegal immigrants having come here.
This is Political Update for Wednesday, March 5th. Rick, tomorrow, Thursday, March 6th, is one of the most important days in every legislative session. The first one being, obviously, when lawmakers convene. The last one being when lawmakers adjourn, known in Latin as sine die.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is Thursday, March 6th, and it is crossover day. The last day from which one bill that has passed a chamber can make it across the aisle for the other chamber's consideration. Why is this so important every year?
Well, as you said, it's do or die, and we have seen, a number of bills really fall by the wayside because, as you said, a bill has to pass at least one of the chambers, the state house or the state senate, in order to last and to be brought up for a vote in the second half of this legislative session. Think of crossover day as sort of halftime. This is the midway mark of this legislative session, and so a lot of things on the line here. A lot of different causes are up for discussion. We're seeing a lot of support for bills. We talked about gun violence, school safety, of course, in light of Appalachia, one of the big topics this year for Republicans, who are crafting legislation that very carefully does not infringe on the Second Amendment rights of Georgians, but does provide incentives for gun owners who go and buy lock boxes or safe storage boxes for their weapons. A bill that just passed in the state house, which had the support of the House Speaker, will provide a $300 tax incentive for gun owners to go and buy these products that a lot of people say is a good first step in terms of keeping guns out of the hands of children and out of the hands of people who should not have them, keeping them safely secured in a home. There are a lot of other items that are on the agenda that are being fought for here, ranging from things like the tax incentives for the filming industry, lawmakers wanting to beef up the tax incentives for production companies to come and film here in Georgia. We know that the state has taken a major hit in that area as a result of a couple of strikes that the Hollywood industry endured over the last year and a half or so that has really cut back on productions here. And so lawmakers looking for an opportunity to try to bring some more business back into our state, since that has really been such a big income generator. And a lot of other issues as well, social issues involving transgender athletes. These are bills that are up for discussion. And, we've got to say that Democrats really are going to have a very difficult time standing in the way of these bills that have the support of a lot of Republicans. Republicans who, of course, hold the majority in the state house, they hold the majority in the state senate, and they hold the majority in the governor. They hold the governor's mansion, which is very similar to what we're looking at the national level as well, where Republicans control all three branches of the federal government and have a majority of conservative justices sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court. And so this is a time now where lawmakers are really trying to make a push here to get their pet pieces of legislation passed in at least one of the chambers, so that in the second half of this legislative session there is an opportunity for them to try to get a bill passed in both chambers that could then go on and be signed by Governor Kemp.
Well, we are looking at an early April final day of the legislative session. If my memory recalls, we're looking at possibly the first Friday of April being signing day, or when the legislature adjourns. So we're going to continue to have extensive coverage on all of these issues, not only for crossover day tomorrow, Thursday, but through the end of the legislative session and all the way through next year's gubernatorial race and beyond. Thanks to Rick Fulbaum for joining us on this edition of Political Update from Atlanta News First. You can watch all of our podcasts on our YouTube channel or on all of your streaming devices. You can also listen and download to all of the podcasts from Atlanta News First, be it Political Update, Behind the Investigation, Decatur Dish, or any others from your favorite podcasting platform or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Political Update from Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com.